welcome back to All Over the Place, the official podcast of Media Pub Live. I am your host, Eric Pervosnik, and we've got another great show for you tonight, folks. And as always, we've got co-host Jim Culver.
Howdy ho, sir. How you doing?
I am fantastic. A great night of baseball tonight. And they even played the DJ/coach, played Van Halen's Mean Street for me.
Nice.
You can't go wrong with that.
Cannot go wrong.
No. And also with us tonight, Christine Leninger.
Hello.
Marty is unfortunately pulling his George Jefferson. His George Jefferson option he's pulling tonight. So Marty won't be with us. But we have with us tonight, folks, a gentleman who is a senior writer at Breitbart.com. And he's also, in a not so roundabout way, the reason this podcast exists. And back when our guest was with Libertas, he was writing there. Then he went off and did Dirty Harry's Place. And Dirty Harry's Place, he commissioned a couple of guys to do what became the Threedonia site. And from Threedonia, of course, sprang Radio Free Threedonia. And from Radio Free Threedonia, the ashes of that one, we now have All Over the Place. So John Nolte, senior writer over at Breitbart.com and now the author of Borrowed Time, thanks for all that you do and helping this podcast come to fruition, however through line you want to take it.
Yes, thank you so much. I appreciate you guys having me on, and you guys have really grown up into your old thing here. It's amazing. I was very glad to hear from you and very thrilled to see you guys are still at it, still doing great work.
We got to keep up with you. You crank out column after column, and as we've known for it's going on. I don't want to say how many years, but a lot of good years of you just slicing and dicing Hollywood like nobody else can. Just keeping it in check as much as you can keep Hollywood in check. And you're also now, as I mentioned, you're the author of a novel called Borrowed Time, which is about Joshua Mason, an everyday man cursed with immortality. And tell us, John, how you managed to put this on your resume after all the other writing that you've done through the years.
Well, I'm semi-retired. I've been semi-retired for about 7 years now. So that gave me some time. I spent a lot of time plotting the book out, just trying to figure out the plot, because I'm not good at plot. Plot is a difficult thing. So it took me about 5 years to figure out the plot. And then once I came up with a big idea, after 2 years ago, I started writing it as a novel. At first, I was trying to write it as a screenplay, which wasn't a very good idea because I'm not a good screenwriter. But I had at least hammered out the plot by then. And then it was 2 years of intensive writing just during all my free time to get it done. It was I knew writing a book would be hard work, and I never really wanted to write a book because I knew it would be hard work, and it was.
But now that you're done, and of course we heard on the Christian Toto podcast that you don't want to do any more. And
I don't have any desire to write another book. This one took 8 years, so I'd be well into my 60s if I wrote another one. And frankly, there's no money in fiction. If you're a new writer, if I wrote a book called 99 Reasons CNN Sucks, I'd probably make a lot of money, but I don't want to write that book. I don't need the money that bad. But writing fiction, there's just no money in it. And honestly, I don't have a very good idea for another book. And I also believe, and I'm not saying that Borrowed Time is a good or great book, that's up to the reader. But I also believe I'm never going to write anything better than this. I'm very proud of it. And I don't want to compete with myself. So, I may get struck with a great idea and say, well, now I got to write. That's what happened with Borrowed Time. I got hit with a great idea and I said, I got to write this. So if it happens again, I might write it, but I don't have any desire to write another book. And I didn't have any desire really to write this one until the idea came to me.
Well, I can't speak for novels, but I know that there are several non-sophomore slumps in the music department. So I do look forward to maybe an idea sparking, because the buzz on this has been great. And I'll be perfectly honest, I have not had a chance to get too far into the book, but as someone who, since college, fiction is not my thing unless it's Elmore Leonard, and being someone who like sci-fi has been like my go-to for years, and I love the concept. I've been so far on Borrowed Time really enjoying it, and I'm looking forward to actually getting a hard copy in my hands on this one too, and just getting into fiction all over again. And thank you, if ever so temporarily, giving me someone to read fiction-wise besides Elmore Leonard.
Yeah, and I'm like you. I don't read fiction either. It's not something I stopped reading fiction about 30 years ago. I enjoy biography and history.
Hmm.
So if I had any influences when it came to the book, it wasn't any fiction writers. It was movies, westerns, and that type of thing that informed the book. And a lot of people have told me that the book reads like a movie. It reads like kind of like a screenplay. They can see it in their head, and I take that as a compliment because my only goal was just to keep the plot moving. I wanted to write a page turner. I didn't want to write a political screed. I didn't want to do a right wing version of woke. All I wanted to do was take the reader away, create a spell and hold on to it. And I've been really happy with the reaction. Like I said, I'm not going to make any money on the book, and that's fine. I knew that going in, but the reaction to it has been just beyond my dreams, and that really made all the effort worthwhile. If people go to the Amazon page for the book and they read the reviews, there's only one reviewer there I know personally. Everyone else has no incentive to leave a good review. And the thing I'm really happy about is that without me telling people what I wanted to do with the book, other than write a page turner, they're picking up on things that I wanted to do. So it's been a very gratifying experience. And like I said, I wasn't too happy I wrote it because it took up so much time, but now I'm very happy I wrote it because the response has been really gratifying, very satisfying.
You mentioned that you wanted to write something that was uh, more universal rather than political and divisive. What would you say is kind of in the creative process? What would you say is kind of the key ingredient to follow when you're creating something? Because I mean, obviously, so many things are political and divisive nowadays. What would you say is the key ingredient you had to follow in the creative process to stay on track and make sure that what you were making was something more universal and more inclusive for audiences rather than political?
Yeah, it was difficult because the book, it's political in the sense that everything's political. Leave It to Beaver is political. It's telling
Right.
you what an ideal family is, and that's a political statement. But there's a difference between political and rhetoric, and that's what I didn't want to do. I think that the best movies don't tell you what's right and what's wrong. They let you figure that out on your own. I think of the movie like The French Connection. What are you supposed to think of a character like Popeye Doyle, Gene Hackman's character, who says racist things, who's obsessive, who's not very nice, but then he's heroic. And I like it when the author, whether it's of a movie or of a book or anything, doesn't judge. They let the reader judge. They let the audience judge. So that was I try other than writing a page turner, my second goal was to not inject any rhetoric into it because it breaks the spell. If you do the right wing version of woke, if I were to mention Trump in the book or Biden or Obama, it in whatever judgmental way, even if it came out of the mouth of a character, it would break the spell because you'd roll your eyes. And Stephen King does that all the time. And I don't think it's good storytelling. And I think it's a bit arrogant for the author to do that because you're just ruining it for the reader. So uh, the way that I stayed out of it is I worked in theme. I knew what I wanted to say and I worked in theme and I worked through character. And I don't have all good characters and I don't have all bad characters. And everything I leave up to the reader. You decide what you think is right or wrong. And everybody has a point of view, even the bad guys. They don't think they're bad guys. And so I just tried to walk that line to keep it character driven and thematically driven.
And escapism is just something that we used to go to movies for, to escape, not to be preached at, not to be told what to do, to be able to make up our own minds and just have a good time, get away from what's going on in the world, and just kick back and let the movie wash all over you. I talk three movie people here who just that's what
Yeah, I miss that.
that's
I
one of
miss,
the reasons I
I miss going to.
go to movies.
Yeah, I miss that. One of my favorite directors is Oliver Stone, and he's political, but he casts a spell. And if you look at his movies, you could say, well, JFK is about this crazy conspiracy theory. It's really not. What JFK is about is a man willing to do anything to hunt for the truth, to get to the truth. That's a noble thing we can all relate to. In Platoon, you can say, well, it's an attack on the Vietnam War, and it is. But really, if you're watching the movie, it's about a boy, Charlie Sheen's character, coming of age and having to choose between good or evil, the Tom Berenger character or the William Dafoe character. That's why I love Oliver Stone. I think he's a brilliant filmmaker. You can have a point of view, but that was something else I wanted to do with Borrowed Time. I wanted to create just a, and I'm not saying I achieved it, but my goal was to create just a great piece of escapism. And when people got to the last page, when they closed the book, I wanted it to be like when you leave a great movie and you step out of the theater and all of a sudden the light hits you and you're just kind of dazed because you got to re-enter the world again. And escapism is a beautiful thing, and it doesn't have to be silly. It doesn't have to be frivolous. Escapism, the movie Star Trek, the TV series, is a great piece of escapism, but it has, I'm talking about the original series, not the garbage now. But it has something to say. There's a way to thread that needle. And great escapism does have something to say. It does have a theme. It does have something that you can take home with you and ponder. And that was something else I wanted to do, was if people close a book and think about it, if they take it home with them, that's a big success to me. And that's another thing that woke takes away from you, because it does all your thinking for you. So there's nothing to go home and think about. They've answered all the questions. So yeah, escapism was a very big part of what I wanted to do. I miss that. I miss that in movies. I miss that in TV. And I've pretty much given up on modern Hollywood altogether, because it's either lecturing me or shaming me, or it's two guys kissing, and I don't like any of that stuff.
And have you caught the new Scorsese yet?
Have I caught what?
Have you caught the new Scorsese yet?
Oh no, I'm not. I want to see it though. I love Irishman, so I'm eager to see this. And I know that there's two schools of thought, so I'm curious to see what, if it's woke or if it's the masterpiece. I don't know, but I do want to see it. I'm definitely going to see it.
I think it's a masterpiece hiding behind too much shaming. And one of our old friends, Jack Marino, brought up a good point about, yes, it's the white guilt that Scorsese's shoving down our throats and everything. Without, that's to be a given. It's on the book that's based on. But Jack reminds us that it's also the white guys, it's the Calvin Coolidges who sends in the FBI, who sends in everyone to take care of business and do the right thing. So without, I don't want to give anything away, but it's Scorsese. So obviously there's something to be, you got to see it on the big screen. But it's definitely, like the two schools of thought. And I think it's definitely worth seeing. But
yeah, it sounds like he was really working very hard to win an Oscar this time and hit all the political buttons that Oscar voters like. I just got the sense that might be what's going on here. I hope not. I wasn't opposed to the idea of him changing the focus of the story from the FBI to the Indian tribe, to the Osage, if that's how that's pronounced, because that's interesting. I've already seen movies about the FBI, and I also hate the FBI. So it'd be interesting to learn about an Indian tribe. I'm all for that, but I am concerned about what you just said, and that's that he's working really hard to win another Oscar.
Well, they have qualifications now, so yeah, I didn't even think about that. He's got to check off all the boxes.
Yeah.
And it's funny, we talked about this early in the summer. It's just funny that we talked about it with Christian about, would Scorsese ever go woke? And it's like, well, he's got one foot in there, but now, so maybe he does. He is ready to direct an MCU movie.
Yeah, and they've just ruined that. It's unbelievable what they've done to these franchises. They have these golden geese that just fire out $1 billion movie after another, and they just destroy them. It's uncanny what they're doing, and they really underestimated the audience. They think we would just sit back and take it, and now it's not enough that they get these box office flops, but look at what they're doing. They're destroying the brand. And watching this stuff fail is a lot more entertaining than the movies themselves. And I just hope the whole thing burns down, because they deserve it. What they're doing to the art is indefensible.
Well, I feel kind of bad because I still have a lot of friends who work at Disney and Warner, but yeah, it's hard not to have a little Schadenfreude with it.
Yeah, the Disney Grooming Institute. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know, Pete. My brother works in the industry, and I feel bad for him. But you can't. My brother's got other things going on. He understands how fickle the industry is, and he's smart enough to do that, and he sees what's going on. But if you're going to align yourself with something as evil as Walt Disney, I'm sorry, but there's going to be some consequences to that. And right now I couldn't, in good conscience, work for Disney. What they're doing is appalling. It's just totally immoral. And I'm sorry. I know there are good people that are going to get caught up in it, but it just all needs to come down. And I've never said that before. I've been a champion of Hollywood for one of the few conservatives who wanted a healthy movie industry because of my love for the art. But that changed a few years ago with them going after kids, just so blatantly going after kids the way they are, destroying the art with the terror nonsense, one after another. And I don't look at it as me hating Hollywood. Before, I look at me as hating Hollywood back. They started it.
In my best / worst, Eddie Murphy brought this shit on themselves.
Yep.
That's right.
And you did bring up, and you and I are similar in the regard that there is still an optimism, and especially now we're watching Bob Iger say, okay, well, I mean, we need to step away from this for a little bit. Again, put the words and actions. We'll see what comes first. But do you see any hope springing from the movies? The Kurt Warner story, or the Sound of Freedom, and movies that are not explicitly political or religious, and they're just movies that tell good stories. Do you see the pendulums, them helping to swing that pendulum back?
I don't. I don't know how they're going to get out of this, because every once in a while you're going to get a John Wick or you're going to get a Sound of Freedom, and those are wonderful movies, and we should all support those. But they are infected. These studios are infected, and the tail's wagging the dog. And the reason that when Bob Chapek was the back, his whole thing about the Florida bill to protect little kids from adult sexuality, from adult grooming in school, was to stay out of it. But he had a revolt internally. So he had all these sick people that he's hired, or that Bob Iger's hired over the years, and they're telling the CEO, you either come out against this bill that protects children, or we're going to raise all kinds of trouble and maybe go on strike and maybe do a walkout. And this is what you see in company after company after company in the entertainment business. And you see this in the media, where the tail wags the dog, where the employees have a snit fit, and so someone gets fired, or they change their editorial policy, or they pull down Tom Cotton's deal, the New York Times. And once you let they've got you, and there's nothing you can do. So all that's left is the implosion. That's all that's left. And maybe after that they can rebuild. But I don't. The only thing I hope is that we get more Sound of Freedoms, we get more shows like The Chosen, where you have quality storytelling, coming from a right of center point of view in the independent world. I mean, those two guys have figured it out. They have created quality entertainment, not just right-wing entertainment. There's too much of that to it, and they've gone around the studios. I think The Chosen started out broadcasting or streaming on its own app, and look what happened. And then this movie came out, Sound of Freedom, and it beat Indiana Jones. It beat Mission Impossible. So it really is possible, but you got to have a quality product. You just can't try to hit all the right-wing sweet spots. You can't do what the left does, because conservatives don't, we don't like that. We don't want to be pandered to, which makes us a little different from the left.
I've always, that's been a big problem that I've had with just the left and the right, is echo chambers. You're just putting a movie out there that's preaching to the choir, and that gets us nowhere. And as opposed to, like you said, just tell a quality story.
Yeah, you see that a lot when the conservative media is first launched, and you saw a lot of conservative movies come out, and a lot of Christian movies, and they just weren't very good. And then The Chosen comes out, and it's got some nuance, it's got some intelligence to it. It's not pandering to you. That is a very, very special thing. And I think a conservative movie should be a movie you don't know is conservative. It just has a universal theme. It just has a universal idea. That was one of the things I wanted to do with the book. I'm not saying I accomplished it, but I wanted to put my money where my mouth is, because I've been yelling at Hollywood for decades to stop preaching. And I've been telling Hollywood for decades that you can get your point of view across without preaching, without lecturing, without hectoring, without scolding. So that's one of the things I tried to do with the book, because it reflects my worldview. But hopefully I'm not a hypocrite. I didn't stoop to what I would call right-wing woke.
And I think it was Andrew Clavin writing a few years ago when The Dark Knight Return comes out. And correct me if I'm wrong, it was Clavin who said that it's just good. The best storytelling comes from a conservative point of view without beating you over the head with it.
Yeah, and believe me, Clavin would know. He's a brilliant novelist. I don't know how that guy writes a book every year. But yeah, that's exactly right. And that's why the woke had to come in, because they understood that if you watch a movie like Iron Man, that's a conservative movie. And if you watch a movie that isn't political, it tends to be conservative, because universal themes are conservative. Self-sacrifice, looking out for your family, all those themes are conservative themes. Left-wing themes are abnormal. They're anti-human themes. And that's why those movies fail, because nobody can relate to that. Who can relate to movies about narcissism, where they try to portray narcissism as a value? Who can relate to movies where they're obsessed with things that don't matter, like your sexual fetishes or your sexual identity or your skin color? And conservative films, generally, they're not conservative at all, because they don't need to be. They just have to talk to people on a human level.
It's interesting that you mentioned Iron Man, because that kind of goes back to what you were saying about your writing process, and you can create characters that don't necessarily reflect your worldview and still kind of see their point of view. I've read that Stan Lee said that when he created Iron Man, he was specifically trying to challenge himself by trying to create a character in Tony Stark that was the complete opposite of him, politically, ideologically, the alcoholism and everything. Basically, he created a hero that was the complete opposite of what he would normally see as a hero, and then made him a hero rather than a villain. And I think it created an absolutely timeless character that way.
Yeah, I never heard that before, and that's a wonderful thing. I mean, that really, and if you, one of the things one of the things that I ran into with the book when I was doing it was that I just got stuck. I got stuck on a character, and I didn't know what to do. It's the Charlie character, and I just kept writing him as Lenny from Of Mice and Men, which was fine, 90 years ago, but it's so cliched now. And I had writer's block, and I knew it wasn't working. And then one day, after not writing for weeks and weeks and weeks, I said to myself, just out of the blue, I thought, well, since my idea is so bad, maybe the opposite of my idea is good. And that just blew up my thinking, and that changed everything. That's really and then I approached that character in an entirely different way. And that ended up driving the story all the way to the end, what I did with that character. And that's what Stan Lee did. That's exactly what he did, is that he said, I'm going to get out of my box, and I'm going to stop doing what I normally do, and I'm going to try something totally different. And something fantastic came from it, because Iron Man is a fantastic character. And that is something you just don't see in Hollywood anymore. They refuse to step out of their comfort zones. They refuse to step out of their safety boxes or their safe spaces. And you can see it in the art. Yeah, that's a great story. That is a great example of how an artist can just blow out something beautiful because he challenges himself to step out of his safety zone.
And in case people have not caught up and not picked up on it yet, the Marvel movies have kind of gone downhill by and large since you don't have any Stan Lee cameos.
Yeah.
Coincidence or mystic happening, Time Life Books presents. And I want to get back to Borrowed Time and Christine, because Christine's worked with publishing, editing, and I'd like you to give John, because the themes that you talk about, John, and I love the humility and just letting people decide on their own. But a lot of the buzz on the book is that you have tapped into those universal themes. And Christine, as someone who has been in the process, you've told me that people, when they get they say they don't want to have read a second book, but then what about the process? Go give John Nolte his pep talk so we can get a second.
Well, typically my clients don't take 4 years to write a book, but I mean, that's fiction, right? But yes,
Right.
I mean, I was telling Eric that, typically the authors that I've worked with, once they've gotten through the process of writing a book, or at least when they're 3/4 through it, they say, I've already got ideas for the next book, which may not be the case, but that's fine, right? But what I did want to ask you about, and if you have a comment on that, I'd love to hear it. But I did want to ask you about, because it's been said that an artist's way toward immortality is their art. And interestingly enough, your book is about immortality. So tell us about that.
Well, the idea fascinated me because it's just as a storytelling device, because the only stories I've ever seen about immortality revolved around vampires or superheroes or someone who was involved in some cosmic competition like Highlander. And I love,
Sure.
but I've never seen, and I'm not saying someone hasn't done it, they probably have, but I've never seen a story just about a regular guy. What would it be like to just be a regular guy? You don't Forrest Gump your way through history. You're just a regular guy, and you don't even know how you became immortal, but you are. And how do you deal with that? And it was sort of it wasn't even a story idea. It was a mental exercise. If I was driving or laying in bed at night, how would I hide in a culture that is closing in on all of us with digital money and cameras everywhere and phones that track us and surveillance everywhere and social security numbers? How would I hide in this culture? Because you'd have to stay hidden, because if people found out you were immortal, they'd tear you apart to figure out how you work. And then the other thing I wondered is, what would the emotional costs be? Everything you love, you're going to watch die. You know that. And how do you deal with that? And I thought about that. And then I came up with the idea that my guy would not be interested, because he'd be worried about being tracked. He would not be interested in making money, because that's sort of a trope in the immortality thing. The hero has got in early on General Motors or something, and now he's got all this money. And I thought, well, my guy wouldn't do that, because if you got money, you got to have a bank account, and they're going to be able to track you. So my guy would just want to be left alone. But then he would fall in love for the first time after living thousands of years. And then suddenly he would need to make money to help his family. And then I came up with the idea that he would sell his life to rich people, because his life is his renewable resource. He would sell his life to rich people to make money. And I thought, well, that's interesting. And that's when I started writing, because I thought, well, that's not a story, but it's a concept. And that's sort of what drove me to it. It was just the original idea. I hope it's an original idea of just an everyday guy who's immortal, not someone special, not someone unique, and how he would deal with that. I can relate to that. I can't relate to a vampire, and I can't relate to Wolverine, but a regular guy I can relate to, and that's who Joshua Mason is.
All the more reason I keep turning the pages on this, folks.
Well, I hope I stick the landing for you.
So far, so good.
If you could be immortal, would you?
No, I would definitely not be immortal, and that's something that I answer in the book. One of the problems I ran into was I had to have a character. I don't want to give anything away. I'm going to be a little cryptic. I had to have a character make a decision not to be immortal, but I had to, because otherwise the story wouldn't work. But I had to have it make sense. And I thought, well, why would anyone turn that down? Why would anyone say no to immortality? We're all terrified of death. I'm 57. It gets closer every day. It's a terrifying prospect. But then I realized that my Christian faith would have me say no, because if I were to become immortal, I would be telling God I don't have faith in him. And you got to have faith in God. That's the whole idea. And then I realized that eventually everything's going to come to an end anyways. So you can't really be immortal, because eventually the universe is going to disappear. So I use those themes in the book. I was able to explore some ideas about Christianity. I don't think they're simple-minded. They're complicated, but they're respectful, because I'm a Christian. But by answering that question. And the other thing I wanted to do that I'd never seen with the story of an immortal is take him to the very end. What happens to a guy who can't die when time ends, when the universe ends, when it all evaporates like we're told it's going to? And that was a fun part of it too.
Heavy.
It is.
I want to take this time, folks, to remind you that you are listening to the All Over the Place podcast, the official podcast of Media Pub Live. And with us, we've got John Nolte, a senior writer over at Breitbart.com, and we're discussing his new book out, his first novel, Borrowed Time. And there was something that you brought up, and I don't want to turn into Dennis Day. That's what killed Dennis Day, contempt for his audience. You mentioned that I'm sorry, it was you or Christian. You guys were talking about Hollywood conservatives in general, and especially conservatives who believe in the arts, who want the arts to flourish. We're unicorns, and I don't think we are. Especially looking at the amount of people who go see not just conservative themed films, but Christian films. I think there is a hunger out there for us, and unfortunately, there are people on the conservative side of thinking. They just want to deal with exact. Money is something, and the arts is something that's fluid. They don't get that. But Andrew Breitbart, rest in peace, understood that. Whether you believe that politics is downstream of culture, how much that plays into effect. But a guy like Greg Gutfeld, I think, picked up the torch for Andrew brilliantly, and can be a champion for the arts. He's someone who is pop culture savvy beyond anyone I've ever seen on the conservative side. And I'm about to get a little Catholic right now and throw a little guilt out at our fellow media people who didn't get who as of yet, and I still hold out hope that they will give you a voice to promote your book. That disappoints me. That Christian and one other person, and we're a show here that we like what brings people together, and that's our commonality. But we definitely lean right. But do you think there's ever a time where a guy like Greg Gutfeld can start shepherding people into realizing that all boats rise together, and we're better off, supporting the arts? Absolutely.
Yeah, you're right about that. You make a good point about that conservatives do consume pop culture, but where we're unicorns is that we take it seriously, and that we love the arts. And with me, it's mainly movies, and with other people, like with Andrew Klavan, it's novels, and other people love music. Greg Gutfeld loves music. But as far as taking the arts seriously, that is something that you don't see very much on our side of the aisle. And, one of the things we tried to do at Big Hollywood when Breitbart, when it was still, before it was Breitbart.com, was we tried to create an infrastructure. And where we'd review things and whatnot, and there was no interest. There was some interest, but not enough to sustain it. And I think the reason for that is twofold. I think the first reason is that you have conservatives are constantly on defense, and the left owns the culture, and we're just too concerned with drag queens to worry about Martin Scorsese. And the other thing is that if you want to love the arts and you want to be around people, you have to be a left winger, because there's just not enough of us on the right. So you're naturally going to gravitate to the left side of the aisle, so that you're not alone. And I think that if there was enough, if there were more people that took it seriously, then we could build that kind of an infrastructure. But there just isn't enough of us. And we tried it. We tried it, and it's just a problem. And now, I'm trying to sell a book, and that's what you're saying is what I'm running into. And it's a shame, but it's part of the deal. And I knew it when I wrote it, and you just gotta live with it. That's all you can do.
Well, I'm an eternal windmill tilter, and God knows, some days are better than others. We just do what we can.
That's all you can do. I mean, you can't have any expectations. I had no expectations that I would finish the book. I had no expectations that if I finished it, I would want people to read it. I certainly never dreamed a publisher would pick it up. And like I said, though, I'm not going to make any money on it. It was just gratifying in and of itself, and maybe it'll be a little ripple. I don't know. I have no idea what it'll do, but you can't go into something like that and expect anything. You just have to do it to do it. Because if you expect things, you're going to get disappointed, and then you're going to get bitter, and then you're going to get angry, and that's you can't look at it that way. You just have to do it for your own sake and enjoy every moment as it came. If I had to publish the book myself and I sold 5 copies, I would have been fine with that, because I could at least say that I finished a book. And it's gone better than I hoped, but it's not going to make the bestseller list. No one's going to review it. It's just part of the deal. You just got to live with it. It's unfortunate, but that's the world we live in.
Yeah. Well, again, based off of what I've read so far, I'm looking forward to, I'll keep the fingers crossed and hope alive that maybe, that spark can hit you for the second one. Like Christine said, the process might be a little bit easier the second time around. And another thing I wanted to bring up, and this was I was so glad that you brought up when you were talking with Christian, the Final Countdown. I'm so glad you brought that up as a movie that is something that people should see, because that hit me at this. I love time travel movies, and as hokey as that one was, that and Philadelphia Experiment with Michael Pare were 2 movies that came out about the same time. I loved them, and thank you for hopefully opening up some people's minds to those great '80s movies, both of them. Well, I mean, you just brought up Final Countdown, but Philadelphia Experiment I think belongs in the same sentence.
Yeah, good movie. Michael Pare. Love Michael Pare.
I was so excited. 83, 84, Michael Pare. He had Eddie and the Cruisers, Philadelphia Experiment, and I love Streets of Fire. That movie does not get the love that it deserves. Phenomenal
And
cast.
Greatest American Hero.
I guess coming out of The Greatest American Hero. Exactly. I was kind of scared that that's how I knew him, was all excited for those years. But now, it was, had such high hopes for Michael Pare, and then just went away. But as we talked about Scorsese a little bit earlier, but as the years winding down, and what used to be commonly known as Oscar season, I don't know, do we even call it that anymore? But is there anything on the horizon right now that you're looking forward to seeing before the end of the year?
No, there really isn't. I want to see the Scorsese movie, but there's nothing else. I've just given up. It's just all crap, and it's a waste of my time. And I got a huge Blu-ray collection. I got all these movies that maybe I've seen once, maybe twice, and I would much rather go back and watch those and get something from it than suffer through this junk. And even a movie like Mission Impossible. I mean, how many times do we have to see that movie? I love Tom Cruise and I love the series, and I don't think it's political, but how many times do we have to see the same movie? And it's just, I've really given up on the industry. I just don't care anymore. It's a shame. It's a passion. I used to love waiting for the next movies to come out. Something I look forward to. It's a passion that's been taken away from me, but it's too much disappointment. And now I'm getting older. Time really is crucial to me. And I'm just not going to waste 3 hours going to see something and get insulted or bored or lectured, or I'm just not going to do it anymore. It's just time means too much. I'd rather watch an old Bela Lugosi movie than Barbie any day of the week.
Well, do they have you're bipping different? You're being semi-retired. You're bipping around different places. If you happen to have an Alamo Drafthouse Theater anywhere in your area, highly recommend it.
No, I love theaters that play old movies. We that was one of the things we did in Los Angeles, was we'd always go to see old movies at the theater.
Oh God, the new art. Oh God, I miss LA for that reason. But the Alamo Drafthouse was here, and then I still work for. I do movie parties for the Majestic, which came from the ashes of Alamo. But yeah, just seeing old movies on the big screen is about all that's. You're not going to get disappointed.
Yeah, exactly. And you can watch those movies over and over again. And I think that one of the things that proves how great old movies are is that we used to watch them on TV, on a 19-inch screen, interrupted every 15 minutes with commercials, and they were still good. And that tells you how great those old movies are. And I never get tired of them. And there's so many of them out there. And when people say I miss, I want to see a new movie, I say, well, why don't you find an old movie you haven't seen? Isn't that a new movie? Because that's what I do when I want to see a new movie. I'll just look for a movie I haven't seen and give it a try. And maybe not 9 times, but 7 times out of 10, I love it. But if I watch a new movie, it's 7 times out of 10, it sucks.
Well, as we've learned on this show, as much as I love movies and have seen tons of movies through the years, there are quite a few that I have not seen that my co-hosts have been kind enough to plant in my brain. So, John, I'm going to ask you to do as we wrap up here. What are 2 or 3 on your list of ones that you go back to in the Blu-ray collection? And it's nice to know people still have a Blu-ray collection.
Well, I went digital. I was going to go digital. And I spent a lot of money on digital, and then they started censoring movies. They started disappearing movies, and like I've said many times, if they'll censor The French Connection, they'll censor anything. So I'm going back to the Blu-ray. But I would, there's some great movies of the 70s. There's a movie called Charlie Varick with Walter Matthau. It was directed by Don Siegel, and it's just a fantastic crime movie. And the guy who played Scorpio in Dirty Harry co-stars with what's that?
Andy Robinson.
That's right. Good pull. He co-stars, and it's about a guy. It's an everyday guy who gets messed up with the mob. And then there's a wonderful Robert Blake movie that I love called Electra Glide in Blue, where he plays a motorcycle cop. And I love Easy Rider. I'm not trashing Easy Rider. Easy Rider is one of my favorite movies, but it's called The Anti-Easy Rider, and it's well worth seeing. It's a terrific movie. And then another one of my favorites, and it's also a Tarantino favorite, I didn't know that until recently, is a Burt Reynolds movie called White Lightning, where he plays he's a jailbird who goes undercover to bust some moonshiners, and I love the conflict in it because he has to. He's torn between, because he likes those guys. He likes those guys a lot more than he likes the cops. And Ned Beatty plays a terrific villain. So those are 3 really terrific genre movies from the 70s that never get enough respect.
Things to seek out. Very good. Thank you for those. I'm always looking for good new old movies. So. And Christine, Jim, anything else we want to cover here while we've got John with borrowed time or otherwise?
Well, I just have to ask if, purely hypothetically, if your book did get optioned for a movie, would you want it to be? And if so, who would be your pick to direct and act in it?
It would depend. I mean, I wouldn't want to, if like Disney came to me, I don't think I'd give it to them because. I always think of Tom Clancy. Tom Clancy created Jack Ryan, and then he sold Jack Ryan. He sold the rights to the character to Paramount, and he hated what they did with the character because in Tom Clancy's mind, Jack Ryan was conservative, and then he was a very different character in the movies. And I like the movies. I'm just that was Tom Clancy's point of view, and it wouldn't surprise me if a studio came along and said, "Okay, we're going to give you X amount of dollars for your character." And then they turned him into a transsexual just to spite me. So I don't know if I would want to do that. I don't know if I'd like what they would do to it. But he's a hard character to cast because I always thought of Robert Mitchum as I was writing him, but a Robert Mitchum couldn't play him because he's not white. He's Indian, and he was here before the Europeans, so he can't be a white guy. He's Mexican, but sort of a guy like Mitchum, who's very sure of himself. Doesn't talk a lot, and when he talks, he means what he says. He's tough, but he's tender. Just a character with a bearing like that. And as far as a director, I hadn't even thought of that. I don't know who could direct though. I just haven't thought that far into it. One of the things like we were talking about before about being a conservative and doing something like this is that I am not saying that the book is good enough to get optioned. I'm not saying that if I work for Politico or CNN that it would get optioned by a studio. I'm not saying that. But if you're a conservative, you're never going to know because they're not going to do business with you. So
Right.
I haven't really thought about that because I know it's never going to happen because they're not going to do business with a Breitbart guy. Whether it's good enough or not, I don't know, but I'll never know. If I worked at CNN, I would know because either they would option it or they wouldn't. But in my position, I'm just never going to know. So I haven't given it that much thought. But the only thing I've thought about is that I don't think you could do it as a movie, but it would probably work as like a limited series, or a mini series, as we used to call them. That would probably be the best format for it.
I got the way to get it picked up. Attach Nick Searcy.
Yeah.
As a director, as someone in the cast, Nick Searcy gets shit done.
True. Him and Robert Davi they've both done some good work.
See, we're here to help here on All Over the Place, folks. We come up with ideas. So some are good. Some you don't know till you try. But we do our best here. And Christine, over to you. Oh, we got a mute for the dogs, folks.
Children, actually. So I'm just really excited to read the book. I love the topic, and it's super fascinating. So thanks for sharing it with us, and I'm excited.
I hope you
to
like
read
it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. The only other thing that I was going to ask you about in the course of, you were kind of talking about how streaming has kind of taken over and the death of cable and stuff like that. When you were talking with Christian Toto, I kind of picked up on that in that interview. But here we're saying like Netflix just raised their rates again within the last couple days. Do you see them kind of following the same path where they're going to end up getting that price up and up and up and up and up? And what's next?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, that's exactly what they're going to do. They have to. I mean, it's they have, and I think they're going to try and bundle. I think they're going to try and do to us what they did with cable, where if you want Netflix, you're going to have to pay for Disney and Paramount or something. So yeah, it's just going to go up and up and up, and people just have to decide if they want to pay for it. Netflix I had for a while, and then I canceled it because I didn't like the price. It just wasn't worth it. When it was $7.99, it was worth it, but it's not worth it anymore. And I don't do anything with the streamers anymore. I got a nice DVD collection. I program my own entertainment.
Physical product is frowned upon in the household. I'm working on it. Stacks of stuff.
Yeah. Eric actually has a mind-boggling collection of physical media.
Yeah, good. Well, they can't censor it if you own it.
I got rid of a lot of CDs, but I hung on to more than a fair share of movies and CDs. And got to keep the box sets. Those are collector's items.
Yep. Got to hang on to that stuff. It's all going to be collector's items.
Vinyl. It's all physical product. It feels good. It's tangible.
Mm-hmm.
Professional Catholic, I can rationalize anything.
There you go. Yeah.
It's just done. I mean, we're four Catholics here.
There you go.
There you go. Just
wow.
Once again, coincidence or mystic happening? No, it's religious happening this time. But we're not going to get preachy. But John Nolte, my fellow arts unicorn, thank you so much for joining us here on All Over the Place. And folks, be sure to check out Borrowed Time at Amazon or any place where you like to pick up your books. Check that out. And be sure to check out John over at Breitbart.com, where he remains a senior writer. John Nolte, thank you again for joining us.
Thanks for having me, guys. It was good talking to you.
All Over the Place, where the fun sanity never ends.
All right. Take that, Christian Toto.
Excellent.